Hey everyone, welcome to Book Club. It's Tuesday nights. My name's Eddie. If you're new here, we're excited to have you. We're starting a new book this evening. It is James Baldwin's book, Giovanni's Room. This is one of his books that continues to perpetually be on the banned book list for many, many reasons. People like to ban this one, which is why it's fun to read. I enjoy reading banned books for the fun conversations that they spark. And that's what I'm hoping will happen tonight. I'm hoping as we get going here that we can ask good questions. And if you're new, here's how it works. It's very simple. All you got to do is click the little react button down below. It's a heart-shaped icon. And when you do that, you'll have the ability to click raise hand. That'll raise a digital hand, and that will make it so I can see you. And then I'll just call on you in the order that the hands pop up. So feel free to talk anytime. Just try to keep your comments somewhat succinct so that everybody has a chance to share. And I'd love to hear any of your thoughts related to this book or how it's going. So before we get started, I'm just curious because we're still having people come in. Um, if you're comfortable, feel free to raise your hand or chat or whatever. Let me know how the book's going for you so far. Are you liking it? Are you struggling with it? What do you think so far? What are your thoughts or comments? The general arc of this book. Yeah, Sally, go ahead.
Well, for me, I'm actually having a hard time with it.
Mhm.
It's it's kind of depressing
Yes.
because, I mean, you could just hear the sadness, um, and despair coming out of his, from his voice.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And I'm not sure. Is this based on his story?
A lot of people will argue that he's lived many of these experiences. But what makes this book unique is that he's writing from the perspective of a white man who is trying to understand his sexuality, not only is he writing about sexuality and homosexuality and many other things, he's doing it from a different perspective, uh, you know, uh, skin color wise, and so, but he does it quite well. But yes, a lot of people argue that Baldwin's life experiences are tied up pretty tightly in this. So, yeah, he did move to Paris, obviously, and yeah, he writes about a lot of these things. Barry, go ahead.
Hey, Barry, I'm loving it. I totally hear you about the undertone of sadness, but God, he's so descriptive and is so beautifully written. And like the little flirting scenes and stuff, I mean, you can just picture them. Like he writes so beautifully.
Mhm.
You can just read a page and kind of close your eyes and picture it like a movie. So I'm loving it.
Good, love it, awesome. Any other general thoughts while we're waiting for people to come in? Good, bad, or ugly. You don't have to like the books you read, by the way. Um, Always encourage people to share. I teach a highlighting method where it's a color coded system, and we color things in yellow we disagree with, and so that's always encouraged as well. Paul, go ahead. You there, Paul?
Yeah, yes. I had some trouble unmuting. I can see why the book, although written some time ago, continues to be very impactful because it certainly it is a period piece, but at the same time, it raises issues that continue to be of significance.
Yeah, yeah, good, nice, excellent. Well, I posted the notes in the community. I had a lot of them. I really struggle with this book because, again, Baldwin is one of my three favorite writers because of what Barry was saying. He's a great writer. He's just a great writer, in my opinion. I don't know, but not everybody connects with his voice. I think I could spend just days with Baldwin just talking about life. It'd be just so much fun. All right, let's go to page one. We're going to read the very first paragraph in his book because it does a lot of work to set up the story. It's doing a ton of work, and I'm always interested in the first paragraph of any book, especially fiction, um, because a good fictional book will set up conflict immediately, right? Fiction is about the human experience, and we all know that that's a conflicting thing, and Baldwin does a beautiful job of that. So Very first paragraph, it says, I stand at the window of this great house in the south of France as night falls. The night which is leading me to the most terrible morning of my life. So in that first sentence, we know it's first person. We know that we're currently in present tense, and we're getting set up for a sad story, a little bit, right? This is not a happy first sentence. This is going to be a bit of a oh my gosh, I forget what's the word. Not trauma, but oh, there's a word in fiction that
Tragedy.
talks about what is it, Tad?
A tragedy?
Tragedy. Thank you. Yeah, there's a bit of a tragic element here, right? We're going to watch somebody who tragically struggles with themselves. I have a drink in my hand. There's a bottle at my elbow. I watch my reflection in the darkening gleam of the window pane. My reflection is tall, perhaps rather like an arrow. My blonde hair gleams. My face is like a face you have seen many times. My ancestors conquered a continent, pushing across the death-laden plains until they came to an ocean which faced away from Europe into the dark past. So, if you are a close reader, lots of things happening here. We're in first person, which I think is the best voice for this, because this is a story of a man struggling internally with his own desires. Right? Great way to tell that is from his own first person perspective. So, I becomes very important in this book, and also we get a lot of information, but I think the metaphor of him looking at his reflection is a really strong moment here. He's looking at a version of himself, right? This whole book, he's looking at versions of himself and he's trying to understand the versions he's seeing and he's trying different versions on, trying to figure out if he's happy, if he's not happy. It's a very relatable thing. I've done this. I've tried to figure out who I am, and I'm not always honest with myself about who I am, who I want to be. I'd like to open up the comments here. Feel free to share your thoughts about this first passage. Kathleen, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to give a nod to his writerly thing there, not just his description, but right away, we got to keep reading because we got to know. I mean, he sets up the suspense right away that we got to know what the worst morning of his life is going to be. And he keeps dropping that all along the way, you know. Yeah,
Yeah, he
that's all.
sets up conflict right out of the gates. Good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Edie.
Two things. You brought up the reflection throughout the book. He talks about reflection, in a mirror, reflection in a window, reflection. Remember later on when he's got a drink and he sees, reflection in the drink. And first I thought about that. Okay, why do we look in a mirror, to see if we got spinach in between our teeth, right? But what he's doing is like you just said, he's trying to figure out who he is. So it's like he's using that motif of the mirror and reflection, to figure out who he is. And second comment, since we're talking about, this first paragraph, I know we don't know the state of this house that he's in until later, but it's what a rented house, so in a way it reflects David's his transient state, unstable and unsettled, and it kind of contrasts with his supposed freedom, by being in Paris. But I think there is something significant about reflection. And then what we come to learn later, this is a rented house, which in a
Yeah.
way is similar to his state being unsettled and like transient.
Not only is it rented, he's behind on paying for it, isn't he? So
Oh,
I think he's in debt for this darn thing. Yeah,
never
good.
thought about that.
Why do you think Baldwin chose to write from the perspective of a white man versus a black man? It seems like it'd be easier to write from the perspective of a black man, wouldn't it? That's what he knows. That's what he's lived with. He has a lot to say about the black perspective, I would think. It seems like a pretty bold choice. KP? Go ahead, Barry.
Well, to me, I was just so intrigued by that. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's just part of his conflicted nature about who he is. Because I know some things about Baldwin that we know will happen that hasn't really, just his life, like we talked about. So maybe it's kind of his conflicted self-perception, but I quit thinking about it. It's like, stop. This is great. Let it happen. Like more will be revealed. So I decided to just quit thinking about it and just let it happen as he chooses to let us know.
Very cool. KP?
Okay, I unmuted before I had to unmute. I would think there's so much he wanted to do with struggling with his own sexuality and the suffering of that. I think he didn't want to um, I think he wanted to deal with that in this book and not introduce the whole, I mean, that's enough, let alone the whole racism thing, there's already enough societal, you know,
Yeah.
hate again. So I would think that's why he made that choice as a writer, so he could deal with this one thing and this story.
Good. Yeah. I read an interview with Baldwin once he talked about this, and one of the reasons why he chose to write from the perspective of a white male is because there was the stereotyped idea that black people were overly sexual, right? That they were a more sexual community and they were uncontrollable and untamable. And he's showing that no, everybody struggles with this sense of identity and homosexuality or heterosexuality or whatever, right? Like we're all a part of the human race, and it doesn't matter what color your skin is or what your gender preferences or any of that. Like, so he's trying to show that this is a normalized thing. It's not connected to just a specific group of people. I thought it was an awesome choice. But it also does what Barry's saying. It kind of makes you like throw the racing out the window. It's like, oh, cool. Because it doesn't have to be about it so much. It's pretty cool. Okay. Page 10. There's like 20 notes between here and page 10, but we're going to be here for 6 hours if we hit them all. So we're going to 10. All right, so he talks about as a boy his first experience with love. Now, one of the biggest themes of this book is just love in general. And it's funny because I was in class today, I was doing a philosophy class, and we are reading this book right here. It's called Symposium by Plato. Terribly just displaying it, but the Symposium by Plato. This whole dialogue is a dialogue on what love is. So it's really cool. It explores various versions of love, and it's somewhat applicable to what we're talking about here, because back in Greek and Roman days, many men had relations with younger boys, and that's how they brought them up, right? There were sexual relationships, and so there was an exploration of love there. It was just part of the culture. There was nothing strange or weird. It's that kind of relationship would be illegal now in our society, but it's an interesting read because they're trying to explore the different versions of love, and the Greeks had many kinds of love, right? In our English language, we just say love and it's one thing. But in fact, there are many versions of it, which is pretty cool. But James Baldwin is one of his ideas that he's writing about here is that exploration of just love. Just what is love? And he talked about his first experience with Joey. And on page 10, actually, let's go to page 9. I'm sorry. After they've had this sort of like really beautiful experience together and they've had their first moment of like feeling real love for another human, David sort of panics. And he panics because Joey is a boy. And he's like all of the social norms kick in and he's like, this shouldn't be happening, right? And so he makes a decision to end this relationship, although it goes against his personal need for love and his personal decisions and what have you. So on the bottom of 9, it says, I did not tell him my decision. That would have broken my will. I did not wait to have breakfast with him, but only drank some coffee and made an excuse to go home. I knew the excuse did not fool Joey, but he did not know how to protest or insist. He did not know that this was all he needed to have done. Then I, who had seen him that summer nearly every day till then, no longer went to see him. He did not come to see me. I would have been very happy to see him if he had, but the manner of my leave taking had begun a constriction, which neither of us knew how to arrest. When I finally did see him, more or less by accident near the end of summer, I made up a long and totally untrue story about a girl I was going with, and when school began again, I picked up with a rougher, older crowd and was very nasty to Joey. And the sadder this made him, the nastier I became. He moved away at last, out of the neighborhood, away from our school, and I never saw him again. So I wanted to highlight this passage because I think this is the first moment where we see David sort of betraying his true self, his sense of self, and sort of the heartache and the pain it's causing him and everybody else around him. I think there's a decent lesson there that to be honest with yourself is probably a valuable thing. And when you're not, you can cause some real damage. But what do you think about this passage, about his decision to treat Joey poorly, even though he loves him?
Will you forgive me for jumping in? Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Raphael.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My laptop's on the fritz. I'm using an iPhone, and I don't know how to set up that hand thing. So anyway, a couple of comments. One, when you read, he did not know that this was all he needed to have done. Very often in the book, he gets into other people's heads, and it bothers me a little bit. You know, he's like explaining. I mean, something that annoys me when somebody comes in and assumes they know exactly what's going on inside my mind without actually doing the work of checking and drawing a logical conclusion. He does that again and again. He does a lot of weird things, like, for example, that with time, jumping from the present to the future and so on. But this is one of the other subtle things that he's at once a first person and all of a sudden he's omniscient in a way. It's like, oh, I know what every human being in the world is doing. And I don't know if he's doing that on. I'm assuming he's doing everything on purpose because this is not a dumb person. He's very deliberate, well-read, studied. But it's bizarre. And there's something a little passive aggressive. This is like the classic definition of it. And it goes back to the original question, why white people? I thought about it, and he constantly is justifiably angry at the way a black person is being treated. And I just wonder, now this is me committing the same sin as he did, which is getting into his head, if he's not somehow expressing some kind of, he's trying to get back at white people in a subtle way. So we're being criticized for being black, for being gay, and so on. Tell you what, I'm gonna grab one of you and paint the picture of something that you criticize in me. Does that make any?
Yeah, I don't think he's doing it. I don't think he's being vindictive. I think. Well, I'll answer that in just a second, but I'd like to hear what Mindy's got to say. What do you think, Mindy?
I was just going to say, I think maybe James is trying to you're written from the perspective of a relatively young man. At the time David is narrating this, didn't we say he's like mid-20s? So he's reflecting back with like shame because of his sexuality and the choices he made as a teenager. He feels bad for how he treated Joey. I think he gets in the head of what he thinks Giovanni and all these different people are thinking, because when we're all in our 20s, I think we tend to think we know it all. We know we're assuming what everybody's intentions are. So maybe that was his perspective in writing this, as trying to put yourself in the perspective of a young man who himself doesn't know who he is. So he's just assuming he knows it all to give him a sense of control over a life he has no control over.
Yeah. Okay. Eddy, what do you think?
Oh, following up on what Mindy said, his anger at Joey and his repression of his true feelings, it shows us how eager he is to repress his attraction to other men. And then later on, we see him getting pissed at Giovanni when he really, really cares about him. And it goes back to him repressing his true feelings that, he's attracted to other men.
Yeah. I want to point out quickly sort of some of the comments that Raphael had, which was jumping around in time. That's actually important, I think. It's a good thing to point out. So the very first paragraph we read, he's standing at the window and he's saying, tomorrow is going to be the morning of my life. But then he goes and tells you why. And he's telling you a story. So our narrator is standing at this window telling you the story of his life and how he's up to tomorrow morning. So you're kind of stuck in between tomorrow morning and all of this stuff that's happened through the rest of his life. Why would Baldwin do that? Because it is a little confusing, right? Like Rob
Mm-hmm.
pointed out, it's like, oh my gosh, we're bouncing all over the place. Well, when you tell a story about what happened to you in the past, what comes with your stories? Baggage, right?
Oh,
Regrets,
yeah. Yeah.
sadness, joy, all of those things.
Yeah.
And I think, I think instead of telling us the story as it's happening, which Baldwin could have done, he's telling us what happened so he can kind of bake in the regret he has for all of the things
Uh,
he didn't
uh,
get right. You know, this is again a bit of a tragic story, and so I think he's sitting there. That first paragraph is so important because I think he's sitting there going, "I wish I had done things differently." Right?
mm,
And
mm,
you'll notice that it explains quite quickly within the first page or two what's coming. Giovanni's getting executed, right? This is not good. This is bad. And so
mm-hmm,
he's really feeling a lot of regret. He could have saved Giovanni's life. He could have had a beautiful relationship with him. He could
mm-hmm,
have handled hella well. Like everything has gone to crap. Okay. So that's why he's bouncing around because we're going from all these different moments it's like when you tell a story, how often do you justify the things you get wrong? Do you justify your mistakes? You do, don't you? Right? And
oh,
you
yeah.
come up with
Oh, yeah.
excuses
Oh, yeah.
for them. Yeah. That's a little bit, that's kind of how this book works. Okay, let's go to 13, The Absent Mother. Now, it's funny because we're writing at a time when psychoanalysis is a big deal, right? We're back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Sigmund Freud and all those guys are big names in the world. So I thought this was interesting because we're looking at David's mom and his dad from David's perspective, and it's kind of a chance to do a little psychoanalysis. You know how they do, like, tell me about your mom, tell me about your dad, and that's supposed to explain why you are the way you are. But I wanted to point out on page 13, let's talk about the mom because she's quite important here. So in the middle of the first paragraph, it says, my father rarely spoke of her, and when he did, he covered by some mysterious means her face. He spoke of her only as my mother, and in fact, as he spoke of her, he might have been speaking of his own. Ellen spoke of my mother often, saying what a remarkable woman she had been, but she made me uncomfortable. I felt that I had no right to be the son of such a mother. So that's an important passage, I think, because um, David has somehow mythologized his mom through the stories of his dad, his aunt that's living with him. His mom has somehow reached mythical status, right? And there's another passage about him and his dad and how he starts judging his dad for everything that he's doing right or doing wrong, right? I just thought those were two um, relatable passages. I think we've all looked back at our parents and either made judgments or felt like we couldn't live up to them, and maybe that is a part of our being that we carry with us. Any thoughts about this? These relationships and how they are or maybe are not molding David? Do you think parents have that big of an influence on kids, or do you think we are just what we are? And Derek, go ahead.
So there's another line just a couple pages after that, where let me jump to it here. He says, but no matter what was happening in that room, my mother was watching it. She looked out of the photograph frame. So he seems to feel like, I don't know, maybe the mother has some kind of moral conscience that his father and his aunt don't have, and that she's judging all of them.
Yeah, yeah. Mom's picture is always up on the mantle. A little scary. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Any other thoughts about the parents? All right, perfect. Give me just a sec. So, yeah. Okay. All right, let's go to page 20. And let's see here. Okay, so I titled this one Self-Deception as Destiny, which is kind of an interesting thing because all throughout this book, David is making decisions about himself, who he's going to be, who he's not going to be, and he's very confused about all of it. But halfway through the second paragraph on page 20, it says, People who believe that they are strong-willed and the masters of their destiny can only continue to believe this by becoming specialists in self-deception. Their decisions are not really decisions at all. A real decision makes one humble. One knows that it is at the mercy of more things that can be named, but elaborate systems of evasion, of illusion, designed to make themselves and the world appear to be what they are and the world are not. This is certainly what my decision, made so long ago in Joey's bed, came to. I had decided to allow no room in the universe for something which shamed and frightened me. I succeeded very well by not looking at the universe, by not looking at myself, by remaining in effect in constant motion. Love that passage. So cool. All right, so here's what's happening. He made a decision, and for years it has grated on him that he did the wrong thing, right? But he has ignored that. He's gotten really good at not listening to himself, not listening to the universe. And the way he does that is by staying in constant motion, by being super busy, right? I got a job, I got to work on a career, I got to get the wife, I got to get the house, I got to whatever. I'm not going to acknowledge me. I'm not going to listen to me. I'm just going to keep checking all of the boxes, right? And I'm going to do what society tells me. And eventually this will, but it's not getting any better. It still hurts a lot in my heart, right? I love this passage. I love the idea of ignoring yourself by being in the process of constant motion. Any thoughts here? I don't know if y'all have listened. Oh, Barry, go ahead.
Well, just a confession. So it's deep and he's introspective, and I love that. But I got to admit, with this guy, the writing is so beautiful that sometimes the message, I just let it go. It's like, good Lord, this is so well written. I just love how he phrases it.
Yeah. Baldwin is a voice. I don't know if if you watch his interviews on YouTube. There's a ton of Baldwin interviews, and we've had one posted in our community. But even just him speaking, like he's a voice. He's great. Mindy, go ahead.
If you know the history of who he is, his stepfather was a pastor. So I wonder how much of that religious upbringing he is reflecting here, of like trying to fight against what he calls his immoral, it's sinful. He's trying to keep himself busy, what he considers these sinful desires. So I wonder how much of that comes into play here.
Yeah, it's good. His first book is a book called Go Tell It on the Mountain, which is the story of a young boy who's being brought up by a preacher. And it's Baldwin's life, essentially, and his sort of conflict between religion and himself. Like his religion is everything. It tells him he's wrong in every way, right? Sexually, and he's just trying to figure that out. So it's a great book. So cool. Good. Dara, go ahead.
Yeah, just sort of extrapolating from what Mindy said there. If you think of the saying that idle hands do the devil's work. If he's feeling, conflicted about the morality of his feelings, get busy. Keep yourself busy so you don't fall into sin.
Yeah, very cool. Very, very cool. There is a passage we're going to get to later that talks about how it instead of making a sort of a moral argument about whether he's being sinful or not, we'll get to it. Tad, go ahead.
Yep, trying to unmute. Thanks. Yeah, the religious background. Yep, David and John, Johnny. Like, I assume he probably picked those names intentionally. They're from the Bible, and like, there's a passage in the Bible where they loved each other a bunch, and a lot of people speculate that it could have been like a gay thing. So Giovanni is, yeah, the Americanized version of that is John. John and David. Anyway, thanks.
Very cool. I didn't know that. There you go. All right, let's go. Since we're in the Bible, let's go to page 25, and we're going to talk about the Garden of Eden. So this book is just chock full of metaphors everywhere. Starts off in that first paragraph with the reflection. This is another one. He's talking to Jacques. Jacques is the man who is connected to David, brings him to Guillaume's bar. Guillaume owns a bar for gay men, and Giovanni is serving there. That's how all of these people are connected. So right now, David, our protagonist, is talking to Jacques. Okay? So in the middle of this, it says Jacques' garden was involved with football players and Giovanni's was involved with maidens, but that seems to have made so little difference. Perhaps everybody has a Garden of Eden. I don't know. But they scarcely seen their garden before they see the flaming sword. Then, perhaps, life only offers the choice of remembering the garden or forgetting it. Either or. It takes strength to remember. It takes another kind of strength to forget. It takes a hero to do both. People who remember court madness through pain, the pain of perpetually recurring death of their innocence. People who forget court another kind of madness, the madness of the denial of pain and the hatred of innocence. And the world is mostly divided between madmen who remember and madmen who forget. Heroes are rare. This is the passage that Raphael read to us last week, pointed out as we were sort of gearing up for this book, right? The argument is this, is it possible to keep innocence, to keep that childlike innocence with you your whole life? We all have a Garden of Eden, and at some point it is lost. And so I just wanted to point this out. What do you think about this metaphor as it's being used in the book? Why do you think Baldwin's doing it? What do you think it means? Chad?
Yeah, I don't really speculate on why he's using it, but it made me think of is it Robert Greene in the Mastery book? But that author talks a lot about advice he gives to young folks who are just trying to produce stuff and also find out who they are. But young adults, I should say, and he often recommends that they think back to stuff that they enjoyed as a kid, where they lost themselves in a flow state as a kid, and that's neat. And that came to mind as he was mentioning the Garden of Eden thing, and also that cool part of the passage about madmen who remember and madmen who forget. There might be a not just a silver lining, but good stuff about regret. Yeah, we could rip apart the world if we are too easy to forget the bad crap we do. And so, yeah, we should remember and we should reflect and listen to that regret so we don't rip ourselves and the world apart.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that he says that there's a madness that comes from denying your pain, right? Like you're going to lose your Garden of Eden. That's just part of it. Something is going to happen to sort of pull you out of that garden. Um, and that we, you know, but it's probably going to drive you nutty if you pretend like that thing never happened and repress it, suppress it, whatever, and just try to get on with being busy, right? Um, yeah, pretty cool. All right, good. I like the last word there, heroes are rare. I mean, my version of that is just there are a few people in my life who fully embrace all of the good that they are, fully embrace all of the bad they are, and they're just present and open and they're trying to grow. They're not lying to themselves, they're not lying to me. I've got a couple people like that, and I think that's heroic to be authentic and to be scared and vulnerable and say, I don't know, this is what's broken. I'm going to a therapist because of it. I'm working on this. It's pretty heroic. Okay, let's go to 53. There's a lot of beautiful things that happen between here and 53. But I want to point out that I wanted to read this section as they're in this bar where all of these young men are sort of lined up at the bar. Guillaume is there, Jacques is there, Giovanni's there, David is there. And David is watching this, and he's watching sort of the transactional process take place between the two older men who are patrons. They've got all the money, the status, the wealth, and the younger men who have nothing and need money and are willing to be purchased in order to survive for the next couple days, right? So let's just read that here. Okay, in the middle of 53, it says, as for the boys at the bar, they were each invisibly preening, having already calculated how much money he and his copain would need for the next few days, having already appraised Guillaume to within a decimal year, and having already estimated how long Guillaume as a fountainhead would last, and also how long they would be able to endure him. That's part of the tragedy of this story, I think, by the way, is what these boys are experiencing. The only question left was whether they would be Vosh with him or Sheik, but they knew that they would probably be Vosh. They would also, there was also Jacques, who might turn out to be a bonus or merely a consolation prize. There was me, of course, another matter altogether, innocent of apartments, soft beds, or food, a candidate, therefore, for affection, but, as Giovanni's mum, out of reach. Their only means, practically at least, of conveying their affection for Giovanni and me was to relieve us of these two old men. All right. So I wanted to point this out because this book is about love and self-acceptance, but there's always an antithesis to everything. There's an opposite to everything, right? So he's doing a really good job of showing the opposites of love as well, right? Just the transactional, physical thing that can happen that some people think is love and it's not. And Baldwin's like advocating for real love here, but in order for you to understand what real love is, he has to show you what real love is not. Make sense? Like if you're going to understand the color white, I have to show you the color green or the color red or the color black. You won't get it. You have to have something to compare it to. And that's called a binary, right? To understand high, you need to know what low is. Or it just doesn't make sense. Okay. So that's what I love about this book. And I wanted to open up that part of the conversation. What do you think about this view of love, this transactional view, and how it lends into the story? Eddy, go ahead.
Well, I thought here that Baldwin was exploring the exploitive nature of money and sex, and illustrating the various way in which people use either their wealth or their sexuality, right, to manipulate others. Because in particular here, we see these two wealthy older men and their power over these younger attractive men, and then the boys in the bar. And so at first they're manipulating each other, and it's almost an even, power in this exploitation. But then of course afterwards we see that, the seesaw and everything, and who has the real power. But it was like money, sex, and exploitation that we see all at once in this one paragraph that he's illustrating to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Excellent. Any thoughts here? Any other thoughts? The transactional value of love?
Yeah, transactional value.
Yeah.
May I jump in again? Forgive me for, I don't have the hand thing. Can you hear?
Yep.
So I'm thinking about how, the question of AI, how close and threatening math is to humanity. And I was thinking about, as I was reading this is kind of an abstract idea, but it's in the back of my mind, is a part of our brain that's strictly math. I made some notes to myself and try to process it. It has nothing to do with morality or anything. It just evaluates every situation we come across as to whether it is safe, and this is an issue that comes up again and again, or whether it isn't. It's a PQ, and I think it's just one of the aspects that is similar in our mind. The way a computer works doesn't make us into computers, but there's a part of us that may even help us understand a little bit better the pitfalls of AI and all the things to come, because in that sense, we do resemble that. We are very pragmatic in that sense. Nature makes us constantly evaluate, do the addition and subtractions in order to survive. It's a very subtle point that comes up sneaking into words. And I also just lastly want to say, the fact that he jumps back and forth in time and all that, I think it's meant to disorient us in order to get us to work harder trying to figure out unclear ideas, which is kind of a paradox because you're trying to use clarity and unclarity, always stuck in between. It's not a straightforward thing. It's just constantly poking a pin in my side. Say, oh, yep, POV is weird. Time is weird. It's not the standard way.
Yep,
So
yep.
it destroys any expectations and judgments that I might have ahead of time a priori as I'm reading it. Oh, you're judging me. You're judging me. Let me show you something. Ha! You thought you knew. Nope. We're now here. We're now there. So it's discombobulating my mind in order to see things freshly. That's my thought.
All right. Thank you, Raphael. All right. Let's go to 55. Let's see here. Okay. I'm just going to do this real fast. Okay. On page 55, he's sort of being called out by Jacques a little bit. They're at the bar, and Jacques can see him a little better than he can see himself, right? And there's this conversation where he encourages him to write to Hella and kind of tell him, hey, tell her what's going on. So top 55 says, what is happening to me, I asked. I had meant to sound sardonic, but I did not sound sardonic at all. He did not answer this, but sighed, looking briefly in the direction of the redhead. Then he turned to me. Are you going to write to Hella? I very often do, I said. I suppose I will again. That does not answer my question. Well, I was under the impression that you had asked me if I was going to write to Hella. Well, let's put it another way. Are you going to write to Hella about this night and this morning? I really don't see what there is to write about. Well, what's it to you if I do it or not? He gave me a look full of certain despair, which I had not, till that moment known was in him. It frightened me. It's not, he said, what it is to me. It's what it is to you and to her. All right, so Jacques is older. He's looking back. He's probably wishing, like, man, I wish I was this guy's age again. I could live my life and make the right choices and follow love the right way, not have this transactional love that I'm putting up with now, but have a real person I can care for that will care about me. But in order to do that, it requires some honesty about who I am and telling other people so that I can be my real self. He's encouraging him to write to Hella and tell him he's got feelings for Giovanni. And he's like doing this kind of thing. Any thoughts here? Dara, go ahead.
So a couple of things. I think he's pointing out, the level of dishonesty that David is interacting with other people, and particularly with Jacques, because basically I think the relationship is that Jacques is attracted to David. David knows that and takes advantage of it, but then hides behind the story of, well, I'm straight, I'm with Hella, so this isn't going to go anywhere. You can flirt with me and give me money, but that's all there is. Mm-hmm. And then Jacques sees, well, maybe there's something else there. And then I think his age is an important thing there that, because we talk about this transactional thing, like these dirty old men hiring these young boys. But I think Jacques is making the point, you're figuring this out at an age where you can do something about it, not at an age where you're so old and decrepit, nobody's going to want you for who you are. So there's a quote here that's not long after that where he says, you ought to have some apprehension that the man you see before you was once even younger than you are now and arrived at his present wretchedness by imperceptible degrees. So I think he has regrets too. He wished that his life had unfolded differently.
Yeah. I like that. I highlighted that passage too. I like that Jacques doesn't love himself, but Jacques does show him how to love. He gives him the path. I think he does. He tries, right? It requires honesty. It requires having a sexual relationship that is about affection and human touch and kindness versus just the physical body, all these things. Wendy, go ahead. You there, Wendy?
Yeah, sorry, I had trouble unmuting. I just want to bring about that, transactional sex is not just between, it could also be between women and men. I mean, you go to a bar, men pick up women, men also look for younger women. This is not just a gay thing. It is just a life thing. Speaking from personal experience, being, coming out in the early 90s was different than coming out in the 50s. So maybe he's talking not just about transactional love between gay people, but between heterosexuals as well.
Yeah, that's well said. That's well said. I think that's why this is supposed to be, in my opinion at least, just a book about love, not a book about a specific kind of love, right? Like it's about how do you find that connection. Yeah. Okay. 69. I just found this funny. All right, so 69 at the bottom, the last paragraph. She smiles a satisfied smile. Men, not just babies like you, but old men too. They always need a woman to tell them the truth. Les hommes, ils sont impossibles. Men are impossible, is the phrase there. And she smiles and forces me to smile at the cunning of this universal joke and turns out the light in the master bedroom. I like that passage because it's, I mean, this is almost like Baldwin just citing his thing under the doormat, saying like, yeah, like I don't get the men of this world either, and I think he's trying to connect with that conversation, but part of this book feels like Baldwin's figuring out his own like head and where he sits in his own self-exploration. But any thought about this universal comment and how it applies to the book? Men are impossible. Maybe not. I just thought it was funny. It made me laugh. No? All right, perfect. Let's move on. All right, page 81 is the one I was hoping to get to most of all here. I think this is quite good. So in this section, David is, let me see here. David's talking with Giovanni, and Giovanni is frustrated because he wants more from David, and David is kind of starting to pull away a little bit. And they're talking about David's fiancée, Hella. And well, let's read it, and then we'll talk about it. So in the middle, David says, "You can't possibly be serious." "I certainly can be," he retorted, "and I am. You are the incomprehensible one." He groaned and poured more coffee and picked up our cognac from the floor. "Chez toi," to you, "everything sounds extremely feverish and complicated, like one of those English murder mysteries. To find out, you keep saying, as though we were accomplices in a crime. We've not committed any crime." He poured the cognac. "It's just that she'll be terribly hurt if she does find out. That's all. People have very dirty words for this situation." He stopped. His face suggested that my reasoning was flimsy. I added, defensively, "Besides, it is a crime in my country, and, after all, I didn't grow up here. I grew up there." Giovanni's response is great. He says, "If dirty words frighten you," says Giovanni, "I really don't know how you have managed to live so long. People are full of dirty words. The only time they do not use them, most people, I mean, is when they are describing something dirty." All right, so two worldviews, of course. This is another part of Baldwin's thesis. He was an American. He moved to Paris for a very specific reason, to save his life, and a few other reasons why. But the European view on love is different than the American view on love, especially in the 50s. So that's showing up in this passage. Also, I love the idea that he reduces all of this down to just dirty words, and he kind of minimizes it in a really cool way. Like, well, if dirty words, what's the phrase? If they frighten you, like, I don't understand how you've managed to live this long. Everybody's got dirty words, you know. You can't get away from it, so why are you letting it bother you? Any thoughts about this passage, about dirty words? Also, like what David is going through right now, right? He's trying to grapple with what his society expects of him. And he's being confronted with a different society's value system. It's pretty great. Kimberly, please.
Hi, I think it's worth, I'm hoping I'm not pivoting too much, but I think it's worth also talking about Hella. I really liked her character, and I feel like she also was like on this search, for what she wanted. I mean, here she's an American woman, and she went away to Spain, and she was trying to figure out, do I want to be what societal norms are? Like, even just getting married. There's a lot of people these days who don't want to get married. I have children in their 30s that their friends have children with partners, but they're not married. And so I feel like just thinking about like even Hella, it just to bring to all of us today about like just what societal norms are in general, not just about homosexuality or heterosexuality, but what does a family look like? How do you define family? And I think Hella was also going off to do some of her exploration. I just don't want to not call her out in our conversation.
Yeah, no, that's actually great that you did that. Thank you for sharing that. It made me think of something I learned in class today, but I won't share it until we're out of hand raises. Anybody else have any thoughts about this? Dara, please.
There's a Bible passage which is gnawing at me, and I can't quite remember the exact wording of it in the exact context, but just in the relation to this dirty words and being dirty and whatever. It's something about like, if you touch something unclean, does that make you unclean, or can you only be made unclean by something that's within you? And it seems like that kind of ties into a little bit this here. Like, what is it that makes you dirty? Is it the external world, or is it what's inside you?
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Interesting. Any other thoughts? Dad, go ahead.
And because Jonathan Haidt, one of his research is on certain swaths of society and how they might define their values and stuff. And disgust is a big one. And we all may or may not, according to him anyway, we all may or may not be consciously swayed by society telling us something is disgusting, or subconsciously, and how great of an importance we put on that. Interesting. So, and I really like how Baldwin, like maybe you were saying, Eddie, he distilled that down to just dirty words, but we all know what they meant. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Steve.
Yeah, I think he's just reminding us that it isn't just for people, for homosexuals, or that the dirty words plague all of us. I think even Giovanni says it to David at some discourse, might have been around that time, where he's questioning whether Hela's not in Spain, found another man there. How do you know she's just not found somebody there? So I think what Baldwin is trying to say is this isn't just limited to people who are gay or people who are of certain race. This plagues everybody. Doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, what your sexuality is, what your lot in life is, because we're talking about rich old men, and we're talking about people who don't have, where they're going to get their next meal from. So it's something that plagues everybody. And I think Baldwin does a great job of trying to remind us that, listen, don't judge me from your pedestal, because your pedestal is no higher than mine.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So yeah, something that came across today, we were actually studying this in class, and we covered the writings of a guy named Michel Foucault. He's a French philosopher, and he wrote about power systems and societal norms and all this stuff. He wrote about feminism and queer studies and just a whole bunch of stuff. But he did a bunch of research on language and how things started to gain meaning once we assigned language to those things. And the term or homosexual and the term gay didn't even have a label or a word for those things until like the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it was because of the medical movement, as they were starting to like medical language was starting to be applied to different things, and it became a thing to be homosexual, right? Before then, there were just relationships. People were, and in many tribes around the world, there are, both kinds of love, and so he just points out that that's the point in our society when things started to become morally good or morally bad in a labeled way. So language is important for that when we start to assign words to things. Okay, and I bring that up because dirty words. It's a great passage that he uses there. All right, let's go to 84. That's our last passage for tonight. Okay. It says, I kept looking at the trees, the light falling through the leaves. I felt sorrow and shame and panic and great bitterness. At the same time, it was part of my turmoil and also outside it. I felt the muscles in my neck tighten with the effort I was making not to turn my head and watch the boy diminish down the bright avenue. The beast which Giovanni had awakened in me would never go to sleep again, and one day I would not be with Giovanni anymore. And would I then, like all others, find myself turning and following all kinds of boys down God knows what dark avenues, into what dark places? With this fearful intimation, there opened in me a hatred for Giovanni, which was as powerful as my love, and which was nourished by the same roots. So that's interesting as well, because David has learned something about himself. He's learned something, and he's scared of this new part of himself. He doesn't know how to sort of interface with it, and he's seeing other boys as these beautiful creatures walking on the street, knowing that he won't be with Giovanni his whole life. So now what's he going to do? Because if he goes back to America where it's illegal, that's a problem. He's married to a girl, that's a problem. He's engaged to one. So now he's really got something to juggle with. This isn't just about Giovanni anymore. This is about the rest of his life. Every person he meets, he's now going to be struggling internally. What do you think about that? Does this get easier? The conflict here is that his dad has money. His dad could pay for him to live in Paris. He needs that money in order to stay in Paris. And if he did, he could maybe start being honest with himself. Maybe then he could have the courage to talk to Hella appropriately. Maybe then he could just try to find real love through Giovanni or somebody else. But because he can't get money here and he can't go home, he's stuck financially. And I think that's an important part of the plot, because how often are you dishonest with yourself because you need money? Well, I can't go be this thing or this thing because I gotta have a job and I gotta earn money, so I can't be a writer, right? I can't write a book. I gotta have a job. I can't do this thing. I can't travel because I gotta have a job. All that makes perfect sense. We all need money, right? But I do think it's really smart that Baldwin brought the financial problem in and gave that as a reason for David not to be honest with himself, because you can relate to it. How often have you lied to yourself because you got to go to work? You can't do that thing you want to do, the thing you should. I'll do it after work.
Forgive me for jumping in, but you just talked about language.
Okay.
And so page 21, to reinforce what you said and expand on. So perhaps, as we say in America, I wanted to find myself. This is an interesting phrase, not current, as far as I know, in the language of any other people, which certainly does not mean what it says, but betrays a nagging suspicion that something has been misplaced. I think now that if I had any intimation that the self I was going to find would turn out to be the only same self from which I had spent so much time in flight, I would have stayed at home.
Yeah.
Language.
Yeah. Good. Excellent. Tad, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm projecting a bit, interpreting and stuff, but the through line for this chapter, for me anyways, well, personally, like whatever, hits home. I married a woman, love her still, but divorced her when we had our daughter, because someday I'm going to have to tell my daughter the truth that she should be true to herself, so I have to be true to me. So whatever, I came out late in life, and we'll see where that takes me. But it's cool that Giovanni brought up his mom, that she's watching him from the picture. And for me, projecting on that situation, it sucks. It sucks that parents trying to teach their kids morals and values of what the parents envision for their children, that also the societal norms and stuff get imposed on the kids so much that they feel shame and they have to run away from themselves all the time and stare in a window across the country when they're trying to just run away from the stuff that was pushed on them so much. They're never going to get away from their desires. And David isn't going to find another person like Giovanni necessarily, or at least he fears that, who will accept him regardless of society's imposition of this disgust crap. You're not going to get away from it. You should be true to yourself and recognize the loving, accepting nature of others around you rather than pushing it all away. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, amen. Nice. All right, any other thoughts? I agree. Well said. Well, okay, friends, we're doing pretty good tonight, I think. So we're just cruising. Oh, Steve, please go ahead.
I would just add, I highlighted the part that Raphael had read because it reminded me, and I forgive me, I don't remember the philosopher who we talked about in one of our previous books, but where he talked about the idea that, you know, whenever we go somewhere, the idea that we run away, we always bring ourselves with us. We're not different just because we're in a different location. And I really, that part hit me really hard because I think all of us in a way are guilty of the idea, the thought that if we go somewhere else, things will just be better. If I move to a different part of the country, different part of the world, I will leave behind all of the problems that I have. But the reality is those problems go with us because they represent who we are as a person. And I really love that he brought that up in the book because it reminded me of that. And I can't remember if it's Marcus Aurelius or Seneca. I don't remember which philosopher it was, but I know we talked about it.
Seneca, yeah, letters from a Stoic. Kimberly, go ahead.
I just want to go back to the passage that you brought up, Eddie, about mythology of parents. I hadn't thought about it prior to the meeting, but I kind of hung on to it during the meeting about how you wrote in your notes his mother was mythologized by others but wasn't available to him. And this has been kind of a big deal for me with my own siblings. I'm one of four children. I'm number three. Um, my we my siblings all have a different experience with my two parents. We all have the same two parents. We're all raised in the same house. But I get these messages from my siblings that I can't really relate to. It's like that wasn't my parent, that wasn't my mom, that wasn't my dad in those situations. And I don't want to judge them. I want to appreciate them, but I want to acknowledge like and share with the group like how I kind of struggled with it for a while, but now I've come to like be more respectful of where they're coming from and also like feel like there's nothing wrong with me that I don't have that same sort of perspective, or I'm not going to honor that time frame of because I was a 5-year-old and you were an 8-year-old. Just like all of our children go through developmental phases and we all sort of study them as parents, guess what? So do adults, and so did our parents. And we have a different set of parents than our children, than our siblings. And I think David in this book, I believe he was an only child. Is that right? I don't remember any siblings.
I think so.
Did he? But he had his mother died early, and then his aunt Ellen and his dad raised him. But he was feeling like they spoke about. I'm looking at page 13 now. Ellen spoke of my mother often, saying what a remarkable woman she had been. And sometimes my older sister will say something like that about my mom, and I'll be like, that wasn't my experience, or vice versa. I'll be like, Mom was so great at blah blah blah, and she'll go, that wasn't my experience. I just want to bring it up, like, I just think it's really important as you want us to apply some of the things we're reading, like just to acknowledge that family systems are complicated and we have a different set of parents, even though they're
Yeah.
biologically the same.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Allie, go ahead.
I think what I'm having a hard time with is David, to me, is a leech. He leeches off of these old men or whoever he can, even his father. And like Tony brought up, he's not getting a job. And I know he's sitting there trying to figure out who he is, but I don't know. In my life, in my experience, pull up those big boy pants, go to work and figure it out and find out who you are when you're working. And to me, you can't really love somebody unless you love yourself. You know, you got to go through those hard lessons. And yes, your parents are involved in all of that too, to some respect, until somebody just wrote, you know, once you grow up, you figure that, wow, your parents had all these flaws and, you might resent them or maybe you don't, but, it's your experience. But I think that's why I'm having such a hard time with David. He's just a low life leech. And I know you guys all are thinking this is such a lovely written book, but to me, David's just a low life leech. And Giovanni, I think, just sticks it to him at sometimes. And I think he needs it. People like that need just a kick in the pants to say, whoa, dude, wake up. And yeah, so that's what I got to say.
Interesting. Yeah, great. Good point. Don, go ahead.
I guess in response to that, I would say he sounds like a lot of women that are sucking off of their parents, their husbands. There's a lot of transactional relationships out there, and it's not just with I don't know, gay men or whatever. Like this is kind of universal. Not universal, but it's not just this book or this community.
No, I mean, if you were to take a tab of how often you're thinking about your problems and what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, and how you're going to look, and where you're going to get your money, and where you're going to sleep, and what you're going to do about your headache, and what you're going to do about your car that's great, you, and you're like, I'm a charitable person. In reality, you're spending all day thinking about you, right? And I think we're wired that way, unfortunately. And I think I don't know if you've ever played around with the part of your phone, if you're on an iPhone, that tells you how long you're on the iPhone every day, and it's like you've been on the iPhone for an average of, and it says like 4 hours or 6 hours, and you're like, what? Because it's like tracking it. It'd be funny to have a similar thing that just tells you how often you're worried about yourself versus, other people. Mindy, please go ahead.
And I would just add, I don't know for sure because I've not researched it, but in that time period, he mentions going to the American Express office, which got me on a rabbit trail of researching what the American Express office was like and how that originated. But I think maybe you have the culture in that time period. Maybe I'm not excusing David. I agree, he kind of was being a leech, but culturally, one, I don't know if legally he was allowed to work if he got like a work visa, and also is just white wealthy American kids just kind of backpacking through Europe. Like, was this the norm for them just to come there? That was just expected. That's just what American kids did in that time period. I don't know. I'm not making excuses for him. I agreed, but I don't know culturally what was going on in that period.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like he was trying to have one last trip to Europe before he got married and came back and did the thing. Dad's sitting at home waiting for him to come back and get married and do the thing. Yeah. Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a few thoughts here. I agree with Sally. The character is kind of a leech, but we don't need our protagonist to be perfect. I mean, it's totally fine for them to have flaws and to exhibit those flaws. I hadn't really thought about it till Mindy mentioned it there, but I think that's a legitimate point. He probably couldn't legally work there. He could have done some under the table. He could have been maybe a waiter or a bartender or something like that, work for cash, work for tips. And as far as the time period, I think it would have been very common in those days for a young person to go for the summer to Europe, or maybe to take a gap year between high school and college, or between college and working. But for it to just drag on indefinitely, yeah, that's a sign of someone who's maybe lacking direction.
Yeah, for sure. Steve, what do you think?
It's interesting how our perception is on that, because we could read a book like Hiking with Nietzsche, and the idea that Nietzsche went far away from maybe his home, or at least somewhat. And then even Jonathan Haig, who did that to kind of in search of himself and to find himself, and how maybe they're treated more with reverence. And someone like David, who in essence kind of did something similar, but maybe because his lifestyle choices are not in line with what we deem to be valuable or moral, that we look at it differently. And so it's just interesting to me how that looks to us, when we're sitting back and analyzing what that person is doing.
Interesting. Ted, go ahead.
Gone past time, but I'm bringing up Raphael's interesting idea, like you were talking about math, Raphael, and it makes me think of also, Eddie, what you were saying about opposites and dichotomies. For some folks of us, it might be very black and white. And I'm not necessarily referring to sexuality, but just morality in general or identity. It might be very black and white at some periods of our life, or some certain things might be black and white for us, but other things might be it's a spectrum. And again, I don't just mean sexuality, but like whole numbers are made up of decimals till they reach the whole number, and it's very simple. But writing in general, this I could be enjoying the book too much, or the writing compared to someone else, but it is very cool in my personal preference and opinion that so much can be conveyed behind such small amount of cool, articulate, concise passages, small words, and like holding the cognac. And anyway, all these very small events carry so much behind them. That's very cool. Very cool. Made up of such a large thing behind it that we get the whole number that seems small page count, but it's a huge message. It's cool.
Yeah, that's why he's James Baldwin. Steve, go ahead.
Oh, I don't think I lowered my hand. I'm sorry, Eddie.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I hope you had a good conversation. Hope you learned something from the book. Hope it's going well for you. 115 pages a day, which means that because, as Tad pointed out, it is a thin book. We're done next week with this one already. So it's just a 2-week book for us.
Before leaving, pardon me, but Ted's comment about black and white, it's a cornerstone of cognitive therapy. The recipe for depression is seeing things in terms of all black and white. It's a wonderful book. I think the guy who came up with it won a Nobel Prize, the whole cognitive concept, but it's very valuable and it's very mathematical. So we analyze the situation, and then we literally assign a number to it, but it's what they talk about, the cognitive distortions, how we evaluate falsely and make false assumptions that guide our emotions. And if we're rejected by someone, overgeneralizing all of that. The black and white part is one to constantly look at. I look at it as I speak. So am I drifting into extremes? I find it really useful because I know where I'm heading. If I do, it's going to get me down. So just wanted to add that the book, Feeling Good, I think, is the book, and I highly recommend it if anybody hits a tough spot in their life. It's a very valuable guide. I don't know, Eddie, if you're familiar with it, but I just wanted to mention. Yeah, it's a.
Yeah, I haven't read it. No, I haven't. Okay, awesome. Well, so 15 pages a day will be wrapped up with this one next week. So yeah, I hope you're enjoying it. I know it's late for a lot of people on the East Coast, so give us a wave. Thanks for coming tonight, and we'll see y'all next Tuesday. Thanks, everybody. See y'all.